This is Cosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Cosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast. And last episode, we were talking about the great year, and then we started to get into some Mithraic stuff, and then we started looking at some tarot cards. I think we looked at, was it Temperance? And we looked at the Wheel of Fortune. So I think we're going to go back to Temperance, because that's a good card for moving forward, and maybe we'll see some more Mithraic stuff, and we'll see where we go from there. Right, Randall?
Yeah, it's possible you'll see some more Mithraic stuff. It all depends on your behavior for the next half hour or so.
If I just be quiet, will you show me some Mithras stuff? And I'll just shut up.
What about the word itself? Not necessarily all the symbolism of the imagery, but the word temperance itself.
Well, Kyle was about to give us a definition of the word temperance.
Yes, I was. And, it means, hold on, let me look it up on Google. No, I don't actually know what the definition is.
Oh, well, I thought you were going to look it up for us.
Welcome, everybody.
I know, I should have known that, right? We were talking about this before the show. I should
Yeah.
have known to look up the definition of this word.
Happy holiday
Well,
season.
let's see.
Maybe after another year of Cosmo, I will start to do that kind of stuff.
It means moderation in action, thought or feeling.
Restraint.
Habitual moderation in the indulgence of the appetites or passions. Well, okay, that's probably not bad advice.
Yep. I also think of it in connection to, blacksmithing, I guess, or metallurgy. Like you temper.
That's what I was thinking.
The metal.
Yeah, to temper. Yeah. Well, there must be some ancient connection there.
Right.
Well, and as we've compared it before, tempo and temple and
yep, that's right.
Temperance. There we go, temperance.
But I like I like the blacksmith connection because you're like fire and water and banging stuff with a hammer,
forging some artifact. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking of cataclysm,
fire and water,
quenching
things with a hammer.
Like we're talking about some of the metals coming out from the impacts, fly up into the air, and then they're molten, and then they solidify, so they're quenching.
Yep,
That's a process you go through with your sword making.
Tempering is you're throwing hot metal into cold water, or hot water, or warm oil. Sometimes human blood, depending on what you're trying to make. Just depends. I'm just saying.
Okay, so from the late Old English. Temprian, to moderate, bring to a proper or suitable state. So
there it is.
You're tempering the steel, right? To modify some excessive quality, to restrain within due limits. From the Latin temperare, which means to observe proper measure.
Ooh.
Mix correctly in due proportion. Now see, that's interesting because in the Book of Tahot, Crowley's book, his rendering of the tarot deck, he's calling the 14th trump alchemy.
That's what I was going to say. It reminds me of alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like what we have just done is we have traced some breadcrumbs along the pathway of etymological history to see that connection.
There you go.
So that's the 14th trump. So why don't we pull up the one we're talking about here? Let's see if I've got it handy.
It's interesting that word temperance, but then there's also temper, right? Somebody who has a temper does not have temperance. It's a strange...
Oh, temper, like when you lose your temper.
Okay, so
Well,
you're
then
losing,
you do not have
monitoring the
restraint,
temper.
right?
Yeah. So if you're losing your temper, then yes, but people also say, well, that person has a temper. So maybe that's just a
modern misuse of the word.
misuse of the word, yeah.
Or because of the fact that it is now opposite in meaning, there are other words like that are related, interrelated etymologically, that have opposite meanings to one another.
If it says bring it into a proper state, and you just say like changing it to a certain state, then you can say someone has a bad temper.
Yeah.
They're brought into a improper state.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it might
There we go. That makes
They're
sense.
not measuring their emotions.
Yeah. Taking their temperature, right?
Well,
Not the card you were planning on starting
guys,
with,
I
huh?
thought I had this ready to go, but let's see here. So, do you remember the imagery on the card?
Yeah.
Temperance?
Yeah, I have it here in front of me, actually. I have the
Kyle's got his deck out here, yeah.
The Rider-Waite version.
Well, why don't we have a look at the Rider-Waite version?
Had the lion down at
I'm
the foot of
pulling
the
up
angel.
the Builders of the Adytum version.
So yeah, the angel, 1 foot in the water, 1 foot on land, pouring water out. This one doesn't show the torch.
It's the two cups in this one, and pouring water from one cup to the other.
That's the reason I like the Builders of the Adytum deck, because like I said, he's woven certain themes back in.
Yeah, and I thought that there was a crab coming out of the water next to his foot, but this one, it doesn't look like a crab, but there is something next to the foot. Or a lobster or something, right? Something with the claws.
Yeah, I think that's a different one.
With the scorpion coming out of the water?
You've got a crayfish crawling out of the water on the,
crawfish.
Yeah, the moon.
Oh, that's the moon.
The number 18 card, which is the moon.
All right.
I'm going to share my from the Builders of the Adytum.
Speaking of the moon, by popular demand, we are going to do a Randall Reveals to be released in January.
All right.
Well, yeah, it'll be it's just going to be a peek. It's not going to be full disclosure. Okay. Let's be clear on that. Okay, so here we see this is the angel of the apocalypse, which we know from the reference in the book of Revelation, which I can pull up here shortly. But what we see here is the two means of expiation. Now, there's a good one for you to look up there, Kyle. Expiation, EXPIA. So these are the two instruments, the two agencies employed on the days of judgment in the apocalyptic traditions, right?
Atonement.
So you have fire and water, which are the two agencies of world destruction. And in the Greek, that would be cataclysmos, the water, destruction of the world by water, and Ekpyrosis, the destruction of the world by fire.
The act of extinguishing the guilt incurred by something.
The act of extinguishing the guilt. You see, this is the idea that's found its way into the Christian tradition, is the accumulated sins of mankind bring on the destruction of the world. But I think the real idea behind that is that the idea of sin, you remember the original meaning of the word sin, right? It comes from archery.
Really?
Right? It means to miss the target. That was the original meaning of the word. It comes from archery. It means to miss the target. And why do you miss the target? It's because you're not focused. You're not focused on the essential. You're not focused on the critical. Your mind is wandering. You're distracted, right? You're distracted. You'll miss the target. And so the idea is that the things that people indulge in their day-to-day lives ends up to be huge distractions, most of it, from what is critical, what is vital. That's the idea there, see? So expiation again. What is it, Kyle?
To
read it to us again.
The act of expiating something is the act of extinguishing the guilt incurred by something.
Yeah. So then the idea is that the apocalypse that comes at the end of the world age is the cleansing of the world. It's the cleaning away of all of the superficial, the chaff. And that's often why the apocalypse is represented as a fiery destruction, to contrast it with the watery destruction with which the biblical narrative opens in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, and the story of the destruction of the world by water. And then, like, bookends, complementary bookends, the Bible ends with the Revelation, which is essentially the destruction of the world by fire. And that comes from the Greeks. It comes from the Sumerians. It comes from, the Hopis, the Mayans, Native American traditions. We could go down the list. In all of these cultural stories, the mythic stories about the, destruction of the world, those are the two primary agencies. And we kind of did we shared the quote last time with from Victor Klube and William Napier, talking about the cosmic battle and throwing the idea of fire and brimstone. And here, which is interesting because we were talking about the Tel Hammam. Weren't we talking about that with George some? Yeah. So clearly there's a story of destruction by fire, fire and brimstone.
Right.
But so in this particular card, Temperance, and we just found out that it goes back to, mixing things in right proportions, right? So that kind of interesting meaning then ties it in with alchemy. And alchemy ties it in with the whole Hermetic tradition. And the idea that you see here coming off of the torch, the burning torch, you have the seeds. So the descent of the burning torch to the earth is accompanied by the discharge of these seeds. So the seeds are there to basically, once the old canopy of life has been removed, you now have a pristine matrix in which these seeds are implanted. And now you have the proliferation of new species, new forms of life, etc. But there's more to that. There are also the Yuds, right? The 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And we looked at the other card we looked at last episode was the Wheel of Fortune, which is the 10th trump. See, so that 10th trump represents the completion of the wheel. And the wheel within wheels, I think we quoted the verses out of Ezekiel about the wheels within the wheels. And not that the meaning is confined only to the measure of time cycles, but it certainly does apply to that, because cycles of time are and can very aptly be described or represented as wheels within wheels. This is because literally, a point we are now, every 24 hours, we're basically making a wheel. Every year, the Earth makes a wheel. Of course, we know that really these are helixes that they're making, right? We're all kind of moving in this whole set of nested helices. But in order to simplify the comprehension of these patterns, it's useful to collapse them into a two-dimensional form. And then you've got, then you have the circles within the circles, within other circles, and they are the wheels within the wheels. And so we have the daily cycle, the diurnal cycle. We have then the annual cycle, and then that annual cycle is subsumed within a greater wheel, which is the processional cycle, which is the cycle of the great year. And then there is that, in turn, is going to be part of a larger cycle, which one might think as well, we would be up to the galaxy, the galactic cycle. But as has been pointed out by a number of researchers over the years, there's sort of a gap there between, the the cycles that, because you're like jumping several orders of magnitude when you go to the galactic, from the solar system level to the galactic level. So that led to the idea that there might be a subgalactic orbital system. And you know what became one of the primary candidates for being a member, crucial or central member of that system is what?
Sirius? Was it?
What did you say?
Sirius? Are you talking about the star Sirius?
Yeah, the dog star, exactly. So that would be an interesting conversation to have in greater detail. Yeah. So we should do that, because there's some really rich traditions about Sirius, and how it spawned the whole Assyrian myth in Egypt, and the death and resurrection of Osiris, and how that was commemorated with the heliacal rising of Sirius that marked the Egyptian New Year. That interestingly, coincidentally, was immediately followed by the flood, which was, the annual flooding of the Nile. But the annual flooding of the Nile, of course, was also seen as a human scale counterpart of the cosmic flood. So again, that's your scale invariance phenomena. So they when the Nile River flooded each year, they were also thinking in terms of the Great Flood. The ones that the elderly priest told Solon about.
Right.
So it was seasonal.
Said you Greeks only know about one flood, but there were actually many floods. Right? So that's part of it, because the world cycle keeps turning and turning, and as it does, there are repeated catastrophes. That's part of the natural order of life on this planet. And that's kind of what that comprehension essentially got sidetracked with the rise and dominance of uniformitarian thinking, and the subjugation of mythology to a lower status, that it had no literal or historical value. It was really, eventually seen as having psychological value by the Jungians and others, but not any actual historical value. So people weren't looking and going, okay, the myth of Noah, behind the myth of Noah is really a memory of a gigantic flood that wiped out everything within the purview of the survivors, who essentially could only assume that the world had been destroyed. And think about this. If you thought, okay, you guys have all been up on top of Steptoe Butte. Now, let's say that you took refuge on top of Steptoe Butte in eastern Washington during those floods. Well, during the peak of the flood, Steptoe Butte was completely surrounded by a turbid moving sea, right? Moving from north to south. And as far as the eye could see in any direction, if the atmosphere wasn't so choked to reduce visibility to nothing, but in every direction you would see this roiling, turbulent water. And then as the floods subsided, what would you see? Well, what you'd see is a rolling sea of mud, as far as the eye could see, right? Picture you're on top of Steptoe Butte after those floods are over. You're going to look all around you, 360 degrees, and all you're going to see is mud, hills of mud in every direction. And then by the time that the thing dries out enough that you could actually then emigrate off of the mountaintop, and you could walk for days, for weeks, and you'd find no other sign of human life in any direction for a long ways. I mean, so this is I'm describing a literal type of situation. If and it's not likely anybody would survive on top of Steptoe Butte, but if you did, it would be a situation where you survey the world in its aftermath, and there would be nothing for you to even assume. You would have no basis for comprehension, how far this destruction, how far it was spread over how vast it was. And so it would be easy to assume that the world had been destroyed.
I would imagine, too, that lots of animals would gather on a place like that, right? Because they have intuition in some cases, and they will go to safe places before disasters.
That's right.
And so in a way, it's very symbolic of like an ark, right? There's all these animals, bugs and birds.
They come willingly.
They come willingly, and they're just sitting there.
Yeah.
waiting for the thing to subside. That would be wild.
Well, yeah, when we start talking about the cosmic firestorms, like Inkley and Peshtigo and others, one of the common things is as the people, like of Peshtigo, took refuge in the river, they were sharing that river with animals, even bears, mountain lions, deer, and everybody, even the animals, like the bears and the animals, were paying no attention to the people really at all. They were all just absolutely consumed with fear.
Wow, that's wild.
At what was going on. And that's what we're about to get into. So maybe we should have a little forewarning here. Maybe we should have like an R rating of, no, I'm serious.
Put your kids to bed, folks. Some scary stuff.
So yeah, this is so anyways, back to this card, we had been looking at, seeing the evidence for destruction of the world by water. And we covered some pretty vast territory, but we were mostly, confined to North America for most of but we could certainly, the Eurasian continent bears the imprints of gigantic floods as well. And so does the South American continent. I'm not quite as familiar with Australia, but Australia certainly has a mythology about great floods. The Mayans, of course, have mythology of great floods, and we can look at that some. But so anyways, this is also referencing here the great year cycle, because here we have the age of Leo. An interesting look at this. The water is being poured out next to the lion. Is that suggesting the possibility of a flood in the age of Leo? Well, we already know. We already know that there was tremendous meltwater events during the time that the vernal equinox was transiting through the constellation of Leo. Of course, we also know that there was black mat deposited. So there was fires accompanying the water. But sorting out, the fire, obviously, I would think the fire would come first, and then the flood would follow. And in the Phaeton myth, it kind of expresses it that way, right? Because Phaeton comes and sets the world on fire. He's struck down by a thunderbolt hurled by Zeus. And then Phaeton's sisters, the Heliades, they weep over the demise of their brother. And as they weep, their tears fall to the earth and cause the great flood. So in that framework, you've got the first level of destruction, fire, followed by the second destruction of water. And I think what we're seeing now is the scientific verification of that dual phenomena right there. So let's see what happens here. I'm going to stop share for a minute.
Didn't we hear that in Egypt too? I'm sorry, Randall, but the Osiris and Isis story was similar. Like, he's broken into a bunch of pieces, and then she weeps and weeps and weeps and causes the floods.
That's right. She causes the Nile to flood.
And then the gods and all the people and all the animals go to her and say, please stop crying, And she says, no, you have to find all the pieces and put them back together. So the whole breakup, breaking him into many, many pieces and scattering him around the earth is, what are we talking about there,
Yeah, well, that could have, the thing is about symbolism and myth is actually the more meanings that can be fused within one mythic image, the more powerful that image is.
Yeah.
So, and in some of the myths, Osiris is severed into 14 pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In others,
which is interesting because we're looking at the 14th trump.
Right. And then when we were in Egypt, the guide told us, wasn't it? He said 60 or something. He told us a big number. I can't remember what it was, but yeah.
I thought it was 32.
Maybe it was 30 something. Yeah.
For what?
For Osiris being broken into many pieces.
Or maybe, was it 36?
It was.
Well, yeah, there are variations.
Yeah, it was much larger. I was expecting 14, and he said a much bigger number. I thought it was 60 something, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's just a very interesting story.
But that could be symbolic of civilization, right? Civilization
is fragmented.
It's like the confusion of tongues. They are the whole thing about the confusion of tongues was that they would be scattered throughout the earth. So that, in a way, is like Osiris, if he was knowledge and civilization, that knowledge is then broken up and scattered, and it has to be brought back together. I don't know. That's one way to look at it.
Well, we might also think about, in multifaceted meanings here, we might also think in terms of like strewn fields.
Right. That's true.
Or an object breaking up, a single object fragmenting and producing multiple objects, which could be the breakup of a cometary nucleus, or it might be an exploding star.
Yeah, that's what I initially thought as well.
Except you don't need to go around and pick all those up and put it back together to get the flood to stop. But that's just a separate...
That's part of the story.
That's just a different part of the story. But I agree.
Yeah, I think that's where you get into Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah.
Huh.
Right?
That's interesting.
Remember Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty
had a great
fall.
Yeah.
And all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Yep, that egg cracked.
So they couldn't do it. So that's kind of an interesting...
An egg from the sky. Yes.
Well, actually, I think that the origin of the Humpty Dumpty was... it was a canon in the English Civil War called Humpty Dumpty. And I guess who was it? It was the two factions fighting within the English Civil War. Now, I'm not saying this exhausts all the esoteric connotations of the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme, but there was a cannon called Humpty Dumpty, and they mounted it up on top of the wall in order to get a longer range. And then the other side was able to fire their cannons against the wall, and the wall crumbled. Yeah. And down went Humpty Dumpty, and all the king's horses and all the king's men who were there engaging in the battle,
win the war.
They tried to reassemble the cannon, but they couldn't do it. So there's a historical interpretation to that.
Horses are notoriously bad for rebuilding cannons.
That's right.
Yeah, lacking retractable thumbs, it could be problematic.
I feel like they just get in the way, yeah.
That's right.
So I want to take a look here at some Mithraic symbolism, if that's okay with you guys.
That's great.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let's see. Here we'll jump to see who we can find here. Because the torch is a very important symbol. Okay, let's just look at a few things. We'll go back to this one. Yeah, here we go. This is a really nice one. This is the Tauroctony, it's called, the slaying of the bull. Now, Mithraism is loaded with symbolism, and it's a coherent amalgamation of symbolism that can actually be read almost as you would read a book, if you know the symbols, if you can read the symbolism. So we're not going to... This is something we'll go through over a period of time. We're not going to try to, take this apart and examine it in detail tonight. We'll just notice a couple of things. The attendant. See, this is Mithras, and his two attendants are carrying swords. And you see how they're pointing, not torches. Back up, not swords, torches. And you'll see that the torches are being pointed downward as if they're being turned toward the earth. And this right here represents the Royal Arch. So it has the same meaning as it does in Freemasonry. And the Royal Arch is the plane of the ecliptic, along which the sun, the moon, and the planets journey. And it's also the realm of the short period comets. Because your long period comets coming from the Oort cloud, they can take a variety of different orbits around the sun. They can actually be orbiting perpendicular to the Earth, to the plane of the ecliptic.
Yeah, they can.
Right now, the plane of the ecliptic is Earth's orbit around the sun. The short period comets, the ones that are coming from outside of Neptune, ultimately, they tend to congregate along the plane of the ecliptic. So that 16-degree wide band, that highway there, which is called the zodiacal belt, is the zone in which most of your short period comets are going to have their orbit. So if a short period comet is coming in and fragmenting, and humans are observing this phenomena from Earth, they're going to see this whole thing being played out pretty much within that zone of the ecliptic. And so that in Freemasonry is the Royal Arch. And so all of the Masonic work is conducted under the Royal Arch. And then, of course, the Royal Arch has a keystone, which is not represented here. But this, in Mithraism, it has the same essentially connotation, that this is the orbital plane in which all the action is happening. And that's why the ecliptic and the associated zodiacal belt is so important, is because a lot of the stuff that is directly affecting life on Earth is taking place within that region of the sky. And then you'll see underneath here, you'll see, how many stars do you see there, Kyle?
I mean, in all, 7.
7. And we know what that stands for, don't we?
The Pleiades, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The 7
and notice
sisters.
that Mithras, he's got his head turned. What's he looking at?
He's looking at this. Is this a phoenix up there?
This right here? No, it's a raven.
It looks like he's looking at the raven. Or he's looking at the star. I don't know.
Who's this?
He's looking at the sun.
Well, he's not looking at the sun. He's looking at the raven. This is the sun god. Over here is the moon goddess, right? So you've got the sun and the moon. The raven was the messenger, symbolized the messenger. So the sun god is sending a message to Mithras. Mithras is turned, looking at the raven and getting that message. And he's wearing a cap. That's how you always recognize Mithras, is by his cap. Now, there's a whole lot going on here, so we're not going to dive into all of that. But I'll point out a few things that we will be coming back to. Notice the bull. He's slaying the bull, and the sword is being plunged into the bull's shoulder. Blood is flowing profusely out of the wound, and here's a dog drinking the blood as it flows from the shoulder of the bull. Now, what is that referring to? And, of course, down below, you've got the great serpent, right? Notice the bull he's kneeling. On his legs are bent. Also notice the tail. It's not a normal tail. What is that?
Looks like wheat.
It's wheat. Yeah, it's a stalk of wheat. So it's some really interesting stuff going on here. And then you've got all of these pots down here, right? Now, is this interpreted as that's what's coming out of these pots? That's fire. Now, notice up here you've got pots as well, and then in between the pots you've got trees growing. And these trees are growing up on top of the Royal Arch.
Are those pots the flaming altars you mentioned earlier?
That who mentioned?
You mentioned the flaming altars, 13 flaming altars? I'm sorry, it's down there in the caption.
Yes, in this rendering, both torchbearers point their torches downward. Image has a total of 13 flaming altars. That's what these are. And here's another depiction. And a bunch of interesting things going on here. Notice up here the flaming altars. And here you got the torchbearers. And you'll see that one of the torchbearers is pointing his torch upwards. Another one is pointing his down towards the earth. And here again, you can see very clearly the sword being plunged into the shoulder of the bull. And we're going to get into all this in great detail down the road. And down here, we have some interpretations and things. You'll see that stuff is lettered here. And we'll work through all that because it's a very interesting, powerful, coherent message here.
In this one,
notice
too,
again the cap.
Oh yeah, there's cap.
He's got that Phrygian cap. It's called.
And the torchbearers are both wearing them too, and they also
they're both
they
wearing
have
it
that
as well.
Same like cross-legged, like I'm just leaning up against the wall, chilling kind of position or whatever that is. I don't know. They're balancing on one foot.
I think that's some kind of Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Could be.
So in that previous one, it looks in the background there, like there's the tree with the scorpion and the serpent, and it's like the apple tree.
Right here,
it looks
yes.
like there's a serpent coiled up in it.
Yep.
Yeah, right here you have a scorpion.
There's a scorpion, but isn't that a serpent's head sticking out of the top? It looks like he's coiled around in the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, this right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the serpent and the scorpion are pictured next to each other. So that's making me think of possibly Ophiuchus. He's holding this large serpent, and then he's standing on, like, where his feet are is right where Sagittarius and Scorpio are.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely, and then look over here. See the tree, and then you see this, which is most likely a cornucopia. And then you've got the bull peeking out here. And then up here, notice this. D. Who is D? Well, this is the moon. See the crescent there?
Okay, yeah. It looked like horns, but it's kind of the image is a little small.
Mm-hmm. So let's see what we can see. And this is a little bit blurry. I couldn't find a better image of this.
So is the whole group of these called Tauroctony because it's based around the bull? It's not just the one in the stone, but the whole thematic story that's being told is Tauroctony?
Pretty much, yeah, because everything kind of revolves around that slaying of the bull.
The Toro, the bull.
Yeah, right. Up here, I know this is hard to tell. This is actually the prow of a boat, and this is the cabin. This is actually representing the Ark of Noah. And then there's you see this crescent up here, and peeking over the crescent of a bull right there. You see the bull's horns, or is that the lunar crescent? And here you have an archer. Could that be Sagittarius? Let's see. Oh, and down here you have the chariot, right? Let's see here. Maybe we get a clear image of this. Yeah. So here's your raven. The Phrygian cap. You see the dog. So they're very consistent, although there are some variations within it. Let's see, this is just the remnant of one, but here you can see very clearly. See, he's turned and he's looking right here at the raven. Yeah. And the raven is the intermediary between Sol, the sun, right, and Mithras. This is an interesting version of it.
Yeah, he's not looking back at that on that one.
Well, actually, if I recall, I think on this one they did a restoration and they fucked it up.
Yeah, you can see his face. It looks like a different piece of stone there.
Yeah. Well, the face was originally turned towards the raven.
Okay, so they got somebody who didn't know what he was doing to fix it.
Or maybe
apparently
the times are a-changing.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not listening to you anymore, Raven.
Yeah. And so here's the Royal Arch up here. And so the Mithraic temples had arched ceilings.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, and he's also always shown with this cape.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting
here.
twist because look, plunging the sword into the shoulder of the bull, but look what's coming out. Not blood, but leaves. of stalks of wheat. And you can see the remnant of the torchbearers over here. Now here's your royal arch. And here with this depiction, then you can clearly see that,
put the symbols in
there. It's the plane of the ecliptic. Yeah. And there's the signs of the zodiac in it. And there's a bunch of interesting stuff here. Now you've got the urn down here, which is the crater, Krater, right? That's what this thing was called, the crater or crater. And then let's see, you've got the cape billowing out. You've got the tail, which is stalks of wheat. Up here, you've got, look at this guy falling to earth. He's falling from the sky. Look over here. Look, see, here's the sun god with the 4 steeds on this side. Well, on this side, what this represents is Phaeton falling.
Yeah.
And up the sides here, I can't make it all out, but, here are these various events in the life of Mithras. You can't make these out very clearly here, but in other images I've got, I can show you back to that, because like here, this is the rock birth of Mithras over here. This is the meeting of Saul with Mithras right here, this interesting meeting that's going on. I'll show you an image of that in a minute. Here is a more detailed look. You can see better what's going on here. You'll notice the tree coming up. And I'm not going to try to decipher all of this now. It's like I'm introducing this just so you can see. And then, these images and symbols will come back to. And every time we come back to them, we can kind of explore another layer of meaning.
And that's making me think of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse right there.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's somebody harvesting the tree or something, reaching into it. Yeah.
Yeah, the fruit from the tree.
Uh-huh.
And here's the other side. And here you see the falling figure. And that falling figure you'll see is basically the same meaning as Zantamach does in the Central American traditions. Okay, look here. This is so here, this is Mithras kneeling, and here's the sun god handing to Mithras the thunderbolt.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's telling this whole story here.
So again, the time frame on these and who was carving all these or creating these?
Oh, unknown, but there's many different variations of this. I mean, Mithraism was actually at one point almost equal to Christianity in the Roman Empire. 2nd century AD, 3rd century AD. It was the primary competitor to Christianity. Let's see here. Maybe we should go into a little bit more here about this.
Not far from break time if you're going to get into a different share screen or anything.
Yeah, we could take a break.
Sure, let's take our little break, and then we'll come back and continue our dive into this symbolism.
All right. We'll be right back.
Do it.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Go check out cbdfromthegods.com. First thing, do it now. Enter the promo code RCShipsFree to get free shipping. If you order stuff, it helps out the podcast. And Randall, I think you guys just released a promo for something new, right?
Well, we did 4 minutes maybe. It's just talking about what's coming up. So, I just went down to Florida for Tampa area for 3 days. It's the first time never been to the Tampa area before. I went down and I did a podcast with Danny Jones, who does concrete with a K. So we had a long discussion, about 3 hours plus, and basically kind of, covered all the basics. So for his audience now, talked about the floods, talked about the climate, talked about a lot of things. But I think it's a good, broad, compact, sort of a smorgasbord of a lot of the stuff that we get into here on our podcast.
And that just got released yesterday, so it is out. But I think the title's like, "Why Randall Carlson Thinks We Need to Leave the Planet." Something like that.
He should have consulted with me before he put that up.
He had a grabby title.
I mean, I'm thinking, okay, that was his interpretation, his conclusion about what he heard for 3+ hours. Like, hey, we got to get out of here.
I'll stay.
But that's not the message. But okay, maybe let's say we're not leaving the planet; we're just expanding.
Right?
It's not like, hey,
we're adding
goodbye,
on
Earth.
another planet.
Yeah, we're moving on. We're expanding the domain from terra firma up into the heavens. Let's put it that way. We're not going to leave the poor planet to its own fate because, look, this isn't why we're here. We humans are here because we are the custodians of this planet.
Well, let it return to its Edenic state.
So we'll get into that idea at some point.
I don't know. I feel like we live at its mercy.
Yeah.
Well, this is why. Remember what the
Will Durant,
the biblical injunction that's got the environmentalists all in an uproar.
We haven't subdued it yet.
After being fruitful and multiply, subdue the earth.
Start with mosquitoes. Destroy them all.
Yeah, well, I might even throw ticks in there.
Get rid of the ticks.
Get rid of those.
no seums.
Yeah, fleas.
Yeah.
Chiggers.
I guess there's a purpose for all that, though.
Yeah, there is. I know.
Birds eat ticks, right?
Do.
And then
ants
they make
eat them too.
Yep.
Awesome.
Those ants.
So,
dang it. All right, well, go to CBDfromthegods.com. Get your CBD oil, all organic. Check it out.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, because when I went to Tampa, I was really glad I had my bottle with me, because whenever I'm in a strange place, in strange rooms, in strange beds, trying to sleep, that's now when I've really been thankful for having that CBD oil with, because it really helps. Especially, if I'm there and I'm doing a podcast or whatever, I want to be not half asleep while I'm trying to do a podcast on the road. So anyways, yeah, I like having that stuff now. I'm using it. I have no reason to stop using it because I feel like at this point it's only benefiting me. So
good deal.
Yep.
All right. So where were we? We were talking about the Tauroctony, and so let's swing back. I'm going to show you a couple of things. We're going to go back to this this image here that we already looked at. So we've got this panel up here, and we see that there's some things going on. And one of the things that we see is this falling image here, and he's holding something in his hand. We don't really know what that is because the image is so obscured. But this guy right here has the same meaning as this guy right here.
That's Mesoamerican.
Yeah, in Central America, we find a bunch of representations of this, sometimes referred to as the diving god, other times the falling god.
Okay, so that'd be, the Christian tradition, falling god would be Satan, right? I mean, he's the fallen one.
Well, here is Rosslyn Chapel, Lucifer, bound and falling. Absolutely, yeah. And here is Oton Cathedral, the skydiver. So this is another typical representation. This would actually be part of Satan's entourage, is the demons that fall with Satan.
He looks like he's having fun. I don't know. He's... Yeah.
Looks to me like he's going, ah! Okay, now let's go back to Central America. Look at there, the diving dog with flaming torches. This is from the Dresden Codex. And here is the belt, right?
Oh, yeah.
The dog is holding the flaming torches down towards the earth as he's falling out of the zodiacal belt. And let's go to Zantamach, the fallen god from Codex Borgia. Right?
That is strange.
Is that not strange?
So these little circular objects, and then the one in the bottom right corner, it's kind of UFO.
Okay, so what are these? Well, these are the falling stars that are accompanying Zantamach in his fall to Earth.
So there's 7 of them, because the one in the front bottom right corner looks, but it's like encased in something.
And it's coming out of a
Yeah,
portal.
well, you know what this is? Do you know what this is?
I don't.
That is the rattlesnake glyph.
Oh.
Look at the next one.
So do you think those 7 circles are also the Pleiades?
Well, you've got, I don't know. I tend to think that though that's part of the swarm.
It's kind of dipperish.
You know,
looking.
the entourage that accompanies Zantamach in this case.
Okay.
Now, somehow, when you get into the structure of reality and you realize that there are this whole interconnected network or labyrinth of coincidences that, of course, initially would have no meaning other than the fact that they're bizarre coincidence, but maybe on some other level, there is a meaning. And how it gets there, I don't know. But I'm not going to say that this has anything more than totally a coincidence. But I think we might, the coincidence in this case kind of gives us a clue as to, I think, the identity of this Zantamach, the falling god. Notice here there's 2 spellings, Zantamach like this up here, and then leaving off the Q-U-E. It's also spelled this way sometimes. But check this out. If you start from the last letter and read backwards,
I see it.
what does the first 5 letters spell out?
Comet.
Isn't that weird?
That is weird.
Of course, purely a coincidence. Yeah. Okay, and then this is from Akansa in the Yucatan. And here you see this diving or falling monkey figure, right? Now, a couple other things that are going on. Here you see the rattlesnake glyph again. And over here you see this overturned urn. And this is the flood. The water gushing out of the overturned urn. So, and here we've got the vase of the falling lord from the southern Maya lowlands, late classic period. It's difficult to see, but his feet are up in there. Now, notice the position of the legs, Kyle.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very Mithraic.
And as he's falling, striking the earth here, you see, look here, the flames.
Rising up, yeah.
Yeah, rising up. And then up here, you've got a serpent in the sky. You've got that belt-like figure over here. A lot of interesting stuff going on here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Hanged man.
Yeah, so we find these themes on both sides of the planet. And once we begin to recognize these thematic symbols and images, we can see also the various transmutations of them, the various permutations of these symbols. For example, in a lot of ways, the serpent and the dragon are interchangeable symbols. And there's a crossover between them. You know, if you've got a winged serpent, then the winged serpent, you add wings to the serpent and it becomes the dragon, right? So, the dog holding the torches towards the earth, it again symbolizes the same thing, the Ekpyrosis. The dog is now the agency of delivering the cosmic fire. And so the torch itself becomes an image of that, the cosmic fire. And the fact that the two attendants of Mithras are usually shown one holding the torch pointed up towards the sky, the other pointed down towards the earth. Could that signify that the cosmic torch sometimes bypasses the earth and heads back out into space, but at other times is caught into the orbit and like Phaeton then descends to the earth, setting the earth on fire? I think we should go back now to take a look here. Here we go.
I mean,
yeah.
I get the idea of the fall. Like, so are you comparing Mithras to the fallen god story as well? Because Mithras is slaying the bull.
Yeah, Mithras is slaying the bull. And yet we just saw
Phaeton.
On the panel above Mithras, we saw the falling or diving figure.
Right.
So I wanted, in other words, as we're going through and peeling back the meaning of these symbols, we realize that these symbols are universal. So you've got this idea of this descending god, falling god, diving god. And yes, absolutely, that connects it back to the story of Phaeton, right?
Yeah.
Now let's check this out. Here's Mithras emerging from the cosmic egg. In his hand, his right hand, he's holding aloft a sword. In this hand, he's holding aloft the burning torch. So these are the two implements, weapons, whatever you want to call it, that Mithras is endowed with right from his birth. And you see here emerging from the cosmic egg, the broken egg here, see? So, and then, of course, over here is the royal arch with the figures of the zodiac. If we go to the next one, here's another depiction of the rock birth of Mithras, wielding a knife in his right hand, a flaming torch in his left. Notice, again, you can't see here because it's covered by the top half of the cosmic egg. But if you go to this one, you'll see he's wearing the Phrygian cap. Another version of the rock birth emerging from a crater, like, see this thing here? See, this looks like that. I pointed out to you, this is called a crater.
Yeah.
Krater.
The big urn.
Yeah, like a big urn. And it's accompanied by, these are flames down here. So he's rising up from this crater-like or urn-like, pitcher-like feature with flames issuing up from around the base of it. And here's, you got question mark, Orpheus, possibly, Eon, possibly, emerging from the cosmic egg within the zodiacal wheel of cosmic time. And notice how it's displayed as an ellipse. Note the flames issuing from both sections of the egg. See, there's flames coming out from down here, and there's flames coming out from up here.
He's got cloven hooves for feet. Is that?
Yeah, cloven hooves. And you've got the serpent winding, coiled about the body of Mithras, coming here, and then coming behind his head, and then emerging up here. And you can see the top part of the egg up here. He's emerging from this cosmic egg. And notice what he holds in his hand. The flaming torch. And what's on his breast? The lion's head. Right? So there's Leo right there placed upon his breast. And here again, we find Mithras slaying the bull, the royal arch overhead. Notice in this case, he's turned, but it's almost like it's a beam headed back up here towards Sol, the sun. Here's the raven right here. But notice the depiction of the cape in this case. Notice right here,
it's full of.
It reiterates. See the belt right
it's
there,
full of stars,
and the sky, like the dome of the sky. And you see the two attendants here, one pole holding a torch pointed upwards towards the sky. The other one holds his torch pointed down towards the earth. Notice the position of Mithras's bent leg here. See that? Where have we just seen that bent leg? Right? You showed
It's
it
in
to
the
us,
Hangman.
Kyle, last week.
The Hangman
Yeah.
tarot card.
Yeah. So let's go back to, let's see, this. Yeah, so this is the one with our falling figure right here, which corresponds to the diving gods of Central America. And so here we have another Mithraic era, Roman era. Look at this guy. This is Aeon, the god of cosmic time. Stands upon a globe with the cross, which is the symbol of the 4 ages of the world. He holds a key in his left hand. He has 4 wings. Serpent coils about his body 6 times. And if you look right up here, you see the head of the serpent.
Oh, yeah.
Right up there. Emerges from the top of the lion's head. While not visible in the photograph, examination by scholars has disclosed that the scepter is wound with a spiral dividing it into 12 parts, this thing that he's holding. You can't make it out on here, but in the reading the analysis of the figure, right? Now, something very interesting about this in the scepter and the way it's being held. And
it looks like it has
That's the axial tilt.
Yeah, it has a 23 something degree tilt. That's what it looks like.
What makes you think such a silly thing?
Actually, because we were measuring one that we saw in Egypt.
Yeah.
I also have a photo of it. I'd like to share it too.
Yeah.
It's the Jed pillar.
Look at the tail of the serpent down here. Well, let's see. Maybe I have it. Let's see if I've got it.
It's probably right. 2 episodes, but you did look at Aeon with the AE, and you looked it up being a, unimaginably long period of time, something like that, or a billion years.
Right. And I would presume the etymology of the word comes from the name of this guy right here. Mithraic Kronos, and here's another name for him, Zervan. Statue in white marble found in the Mithraeum in Ostia, Italy. Note the 4 wings that have been broken off. While not visible in the photograph, the 4 wings carry symbols of the 4 seasons, the cosmic seasons, right? According to scholarly analysis. The 4 seasons are also symbols for the 4 ages of the world, dates from 190 AD. And look what's on his, right here on his chest. He's holding the key in his right hand. And then there's this strange little object right here with 12 dots or holes in it. He's holding the scepter. And then look right on his chest. You see what that is? The thunderbolt.
What's that called?
And again, the serpent
The Vajra.
coiled about his body. So here's the interpretation. And down here, look at this. You got a pine cone down here, tongs and a hammer, a cock, the caduceus right here, the scepter, the key, the serpent's head, the thunderbolt, and a key with 12 holes.
So the key is the thing that has 12 holes in it. Is that?
Yes.
Is that similar to the? What is that thing that the? I'm thinking of something. It was what was it? The Jewish priests wore on their.
Yeah, the breastplate.
Yeah, the breastplate with the 12 jewels in it.
I would think so.
Yeah,
okay, that's what it reminded me of too. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a white marble bas-relief found in Rome in association with the preceding statue. Note that the serpent is coiled downward. You see this? Look at this. This time the serpent is coiled downward and appears to be either drinking from or descending into the crater. Again with a K.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And notice here, he says here, note that each hand holds a key. Here's another version. Going down here, here's the thunderbolt.
Yeah, that's a closed Vajra.
Yep, like the Vajra,
Yeah.
right. A partially destroyed relief in limestone of a standing aeon with 4 wings, one pair pointing up, the other pointing down. This lion-headed figure had a rayed nimbus about its head. Note the cloven hoofs and lower part of the body covered with hair. He holds a key in each hand and also holds a torch in his right hand, which has been partially broken off. Between his hands, on his breast, right here, is a thunderbolt. A snake descends from each hand as well. See the snakes coming down here? Each snake is coming down and either descending into or drinking from the urn, the crater down here. The snake holds its head above a crater, and from his right hand, the snake hovers over a burning altar.
Okay.
That's on this
So there's
side.
fire and then water.
Yes. So you've got the crater,
Yeah.
right? The serpent's descending into the crater, and one crater is water, and one crater is fire.
Yeah.
Finally, a third serpent comes out of Aeon's mouth and also descends to the burning altar. And you can see that's this right here. It's hard to make out, but
So is this,
that's what's...
I'm sorry, but is this symbolism changing over time from the previous ones we looked at? Like he's got more snakes now and there's different things happening, or like is that one that we just looked at a later adaptation of those earlier statues or something?
Not necessarily. I think what you have to realize is that this complex of symbolism is such that each artist probably added his own idiosyncratic interpretation of it. But I'm guessing that each artist was also an initiate of the mysteries.
Yeah, like they were taught in the same school, but they each express in different ways.
This one just is completely lacking the serpent wrapping around the body, and which all the other ones had in common, and suddenly that's gone. I'm just wondering if it's
right. But what I tend to think is that what this does essentially is it expands the variations of the meaning.
Okay. All right. So they're
provides different ways of looking at the symbols and from different perspectives.
Okay.
And
so each artist is highlighting parts of it that they feel are important by showing it in a slightly different way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So let's jump to this one. This is a plate. See here. So here we go. What's going on here? Here's Helios, the sun god, in the center. So just like the sun is poised in the center of the solar system. And then we have the symbols for the 4 seasons, which have a dual meaning of both the annular cycle and the cosmic cycle. So here's winter, right? Here's summer, right here. Here's autumn, right here. Notice there's a horse right here. And then who's this guy who's having some kind of an interaction with the sun god? That's Phaeton right there. Okay. Down here, you've got a water jug, which is being overturned, and here water is pouring out. Over here, you've got a cornucopia. Here, you've got a sail, a vellum, or a sail, like the wind is blowing, right? You got another horse right here. Here's the symbol for summer. Another horse right up here. And then look at this thing. So there's the thunderbolt. Right? So you've got Phaeton, you've got the whole pantheon here of these different things going on. And what's the thing that's interesting here is this is Phaeton entreating the sun god to let him drive the chariots. And these horses are the horses that would be driving the chariots. So it's linking the Mithraic story to the myth of Phaeton right here. And let's see, I think we've got let's see, what's this one? What we got here. Trying to see if I've got the, like this thing right here with the tree with the 3 heads.
Oh, they've got the caps.
And they've all got the caps, yep. So what is the meaning of that, the myth, the Phrygian cap? That has a deep symbolism as well. Okay, let's conclude with this one right here. This is the torch-bearing, lion-headed god breathing fire into the burning altar. Note the 4 serpents entwined about the 4 wings. The wings, the serpents,
All right.
the torches held aloft,
Yeah,
the burning altar. And notice the fire coming out of the lion's mouth, coming down here to ignite the altar.
Okay, so in that one, the torches are pointed to the sky, but there's still fire being breathed onto the ground.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the figures of, that's Kylus is how that's pronounced. In the figures of Kylus, Tellus, and Oceanus, the elements of air, earth, and water are symbolized. The element, now this is from discussion of the Mithras imagery that we're just looking at. Corpus inscriptionum et monumentorum religionis Mithraicae. Okay. The element of fire is represented in the main scene, which is unique in Mithraic monuments and which refers to the end of the world. According to Humont, Phaeton, who implores Helios to guide the quadriga, right, 4 horses, which now links that to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The quadriga is a symbol of the Platonic and Stoic Ekpyrosis. The Mithraists were of the opinion that Mithras himself was the author of the world conflagration, and so they identified Mithras with Phaeton.
So
here now we have this convergence of symbolism.
Yeah, so they believed that Mithras was the one that would set the world aflame, like that he is the Phaeton person as well.
Well,
the Mithras were of the opinion that Mithras himself was the author of the world conflagration.
This is not much different than Christianity, where the Christians believe that God himself destroyed the planet, destroyed the world.
Yeah, I'm just...
Yeah. All right, this is a little program I put together when I was really researching. Most of this goes back to the 90s, but it's been updated. So this is the Ekpyrosis, and I'm calling this the descent of the firestorm. And Revelations 29 refers to this when it says, "And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them." So in my introduction, this is what I say. Ancient myths and religious prophecies are replete with tales of world destruction and catastrophe resulting from all-consuming fires. Analogous with ancient tales of universal destruction from a great deluge, only a few survivors remain in the aftermath to replenish the race. The Greeks told such tales and referred to the process of world destruction through fire as Ekpyrosis, the counterpart to cataclysmos, or world destruction by flood. The biblical account relates that the world was previously destroyed through the agency of water and will suffer destruction through fire at some unspecified future date, which is euphemistically referred to as Judgment Day. As with the flood story, the vision of a world-destroying fiery holocaust was by no means limited to the Greeks or to the Bible, but is found in dozens of traditions from all over the world. Since the 19th century, academic and scholarly interpretations of the past have proceeded from the assumption of a relatively continual cultural progress from Stone Age barbarism up through ever more sophisticated examples of civilization, culminating in modern society, with an occasional interruption thrown in to satisfy the demands of evidence contrary to the gradualist model. This idea was the lens through which antiquity was viewed by modern scholarship for the better part of the 20th century. It was not conceded that ancient humans, certainly not in prehistory, might have had a sophisticated understanding of natural law, science, or technology to any degree comparable to the present. With the dominance of this mindset, all evidence to the contrary was conveniently dismissed, ignored, or subject to modernist reductionism. However, paradigm-changing evidence amassed in the past half-century or so for a much greater complexity and depth to both human and natural history has now become overwhelming and irrefutable. So from there, we go to a quote from a dissertation published in 1994 by Victoria Nicole Voitko. And I thought it really was a good segue into this next topic that we're going to be diving into, called Recurrence and Teleology in Stoic Physics. And here's the quote. Tucked into the orthodox Stoic doctrine are two distinct theories. First, there is the claim that the cosmos undergoes cyclic destruction by fire, a conflagration or Ekpyrosis sparked by a particular alignment of celestial bodies. Each Ekpyrosis is followed by a period of cosmic regeneration and the spontaneous creation of a new world. So there is, from one of the Mayan codices, this quote, and of course it's translated, but at the close of the ages it hath been decreed, the world shall be purged with a ravening fire. And then we have the Mahabharata, the Vedic masterpiece. And this is what will take place at the end of the Yuga, when men become fierce and destitute of virtue. Then does the Yuga come to an end, and the course of the winds will be confused and agitated, and innumerable meteors will flash through the sky, foreboding evil. And then the sun will appear with 6 others of the same kind, and all around will be din and uproar, and everywhere there will be conflagrations, and fires will blaze up on all sides when the end of the Yuga comes. And then from Brazilian traditions, Monan, without beginning or end, author of all that is, seeing the ingratitude of men and their contempt for him who had made them thus joyous, withdrew from them and sent upon them Pata, the divine fire, which burned all that there was on the surface of the earth. The Book of the Hopi. So the people went down to live with the ant people. When they were all safe and settled, Teowak commanded Sotuknung to destroy the world. He rained fire upon it. Fire came from above and below and all around until the earth, the waters, the air, all was one element, fire. And there was nothing left except the people, safe inside the womb of the earth. And from the Voluspa, the elder Eddas of the Nordic tradition, Surt, S-U-R-T, Surt, from the south comes with flickering flame. The sun darkens, earth in ocean sinks, fall from heaven the bright stars. Fire's breath assails the all-nourishing tree. Towering fire plays against heaven itself. In Isaiah 24th chapter, 6th verse, therefore hath the curse devoured the earth. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. And then from Daniel G. Brinton's Myths of the New World, published way back in 1868. Daniel Brinton, by the way, was an archaeologist and ethnologist. And in the Myths of the New World, this is what he was talking about, the varied myths having to do with fire. By far the greater number of South American tribes represent the last destruction of the world to have been by water. A few, however, the Tacalas of North Pacific coast, the Araucarias of the Bolivian Cordilleras, and the Umbacobi of Paraguay, attribute it to a general conflagration which swept over the whole earth, consuming every living thing except a few who took refuge in a deep cave. Isaiah chapter 29, verse 6. Thou shalt be visited of the Lord of hosts with thunder and with earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest, and the flame of all devouring fire. I think you get the point here from the apocryphal text Nahum 1:6. Who can stand before his indignation, and who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? His fury is poured out like fire, and the rocks are thrown down by him. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 15 through 16. For behold, the Lord will come with fire, and his chariots are like a whirlwind, to render his wrath and indignation, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For the Lord shall judge by fire, and by his sword unto all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. So, and then relative to our discussion about Tal Hamam, 19th chapter of Genesis, then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And Abraham gat up early in the morning, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. Malachi chapter 4. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of the host, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. So I think you can see that there's this idea of the earth being destroyed by fire is not quite as prevalent as the destruction of the earth by water, but it certainly plays a very important role. And now I think that what we will do here is we will look at some modern examples of some very unusual fires that have occurred in recent history. And then we'll revisit some of these quotes and a few that I haven't even read yet. But I think the point here is that we can now see that behind this, say, the mythic imagery of the Great Flood, there's actual evidence of world-destroying floods. And I, earlier in the conversation, I used the analogy of somebody who'd survived some of these floods. If you look at the flood that came down the Livingstone Lake event, for example, or the flood that came down from Lake Agassiz and swept down over, 200 miles wide across Minnesota, the Dakotas, and ultimately to the Gulf of Mexico. Well, we can understand how survivors see. Here's the thing: we get these two extreme versions. On the one hand, you have the scientific worldview, which completely ignores the possibility of there having been a quote unquote world-destroying flood, right? Again, though, what I have done is tried to define what we mean by a world-destroying flood. We're not necessarily meaning what would occur on the other end of the spectrum, where you have the biblical literalist imagining supernatural waters drowning the whole entire planet uniformly up to the highest mountains. And that's literally what they're envisioning. And they're not really looking for any scientific explanation for what could cause a flood that would, again, in quotes, world destroying. Because what do we mean? I don't necessarily mean planet destroying, but I say world destroying in that in the few scattered survivors that have somehow managed to make it through these catastrophes of flood and fire. From their perspective, the world has been destroyed. Their world has been destroyed. When survivors disembarked the ark, what was around them? Well, nothing. It was a sea of mud in every direction. And we now know that that this is not some contrived, ridiculous science fiction scenario. The scale of the floods that we now see, when we're talking about floods that are 300 to 700, 800, close to 1 billion cubic feet per second, we're talking about world-destroying floods, So now, through that same kind of a perspective, through that same kind of lens, let's examine the ideas of world destruction by fire and see what there might be in nature. And we already have a pretty solid clue, right? Hey, the documentary that I worked on back in 1996, Fire from the Sky. That was the name of the show, Fire from the Sky. And in that show, maybe we could find even the clip that I'm in that clip, I'm talking about these historical examples of fire from the sky. And I think what we'll do is, when we got a few minutes left, maybe what we'll do is leave it to set up for our next episode is to we talked earlier about coincidence. Well, if you look in American history over the last couple of 100 years, we have an example of the most disastrous urban fire in American history and the most disastrous forest fire in American history in terms of destruction, in terms of lives lost, and so on. We have one each. We have a most disastrous, most catastrophic urban fire, most catastrophic forest fire. Okay, what was the most obvious urban fire that would be the good candidate for that?
Chicago fire.
Chicago. What's lesser known, and almost everybody has heard of the Chicago fire, Mrs. O'Leary's cow, and et cetera, right? Or at least everybody from my generation had heard of it. I don't know about some of these millennials these days that you got to wonder what they know and don't know. But so the Chicago fire, okay,
so 150 years ago,
most devastating forest fire was the so-called Peshtigo fire, which consumed multiple towns, but the one that suffered the most loss and therefore made it into the history books was Peshtigo, Wisconsin, which is up along the Green Bay, right? And that was the most destructive forest fire in terms of the intensity, the severity, the magnitude, the number of deaths and casualties. It was something like 1,800 to 2,000. They don't really know the full number of people that died because there were, corpses found, months after the thing, out in the charred remnants of the woods and things, corpses that, people who were probably utterly, completely consumed in the fire. But it was probably somewhere getting up towards 2,000 people that died. So that was the Peshtigo fire. Now, here's what's interesting, and this is what we're going to kind of be diving into. The Chicago fire, when you go back to and you work your way through the histories of it and the accounts of it, for the most part, the fire broke out on a Sunday evening in early October 8th to be exact, 1871. And the first really indication that there was some really extraordinary fire catastrophe getting underway was at 9:00 that night. The fires that burned up Chicago really began. So, they say, well, if you go to of course, Mrs. O'Leary's cow story is apocryphal. That's not, I don't think any scholars really think that the story of the cow kicking over the lantern. However, interesting is that we'll see that there's kind of some interesting symbolism to the idea of the cow causing the conflagration.
Wow.
But in other words, what I'm getting at is the conflagration really seemed to start right around 9 p.m. Sunday evening, October 8th, 1871. Now, you turn over to the Peshtigo accounts, and the eyewitnesses talk about the great firestorm that swept out of the forest and like consumed the village and so forth. And, we're going to be looking at eyewitness accounts and going through those and so on. But from, examination of those accounts to all interpretations, that fire broke out suddenly, catastrophically at 9 o'clock Sunday night, October 8th, 1871. In other words, the greatest, most destructive forest fire in American history and the greatest, most destructive urban fire in American history basically both started simultaneously. They were both ignited within minutes of each other.
Wow.
And how far away from each other were they?
A couple 100 miles.
That's crazy.
Over the lake.
But what's even lesser known is that across Lake Michigan, is it Manistee, I believe is how it's pronounced, Manistee? There was a lumber camp there, and there was a conflagration there. Now, it's not as well known because the number of people that died was much less than the number of people that died at Peshtigo, because it was much more sparsely inhabited. But again, we have the eyewitness accounts that say that this tremendous firestorm ignited almost instantaneously around 9 p.m. Sunday night.
Wow.
So, so we're going to get in and we're going to look at that, and we're going to ask the question, is this coincidence or is there some greater significance to this? So we'll go through some, when we were researching this for the documentary in 1996, of course, almost nobody had internet. So, we actually went up to Wisconsin and went to the town of Peshtigo, and I visited the curator of the Peshtigo Fire Museum, who I'm sure is passed on now, because he was quite an elderly gentleman. So I had access to a lot of unpublished eyewitness accounts, which I've put together. And some of those I think I have subsequently been posted online. I would imagine that, if Robert, what was his last name? Escapes me right now, but, when he retired or passed on, hopefully somebody is curating the fire museum up there. And so maybe they have taken it upon themselves to start, putting some of that stuff, digitizing some of that stuff. But in 96, it was mostly unpublished stuff and not accessible to the general public. We went in there and, spent the afternoon with the curator of the museum, and he told us a lot of stories that ended up, he's interviewed in the show. But I was able to photocopy a bunch of stuff. And so we're going to look at some of those eyewitness accounts, and I got to tell you, they're extraordinary.
All right. Well, looking forward to that.
So, we just missed the
pretty exciting stuff.
150th anniversary of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that museum's still there. I went by there a couple years ago when you went to the retreat in Minnesota, and I went up to the North Shore of Lake Superior. I went by there. It was closed later in the day, but it's still there.
Okay.
Still there. All right.
Well, it'd be interesting to pay them a visit again and see if they updated their collection. Did they have new accounts? Have there been new studies that I'm not aware of? But there's going to be some pretty mind-blowing stuff coming out of this. It'll probably take at least 2 segments to cover the material adequately. But at the end of it, it's going to add a whole interesting dimension to our investigations.
Right on, man.
All right. Well, listen, man, if you're going to read long biblical passages on the next show, I'm going to need more like Baptist Southern Preacher Fire and Brimstone. Like, come on. You can't read those just like world destroying passages in a calm, moderated voice. That's not how it's done.
Yes, cosmic fire will descend to the earth. And well, I was trying not to get emotive.
No, you gotta.
I was wanting to. I was holding myself back. I was practicing temperance.
No.
I was using restraint.
No, you gotta, give me some Samuel L. Jackson. They will know my name is the Lord when I rain my vengeance upon thee.
Next episode, we'll
work on it.
I'll put on my Old Testament prophet
Phrygian
hat.
cap.
I put on my Phrygian cap.
There'll be opportunities reading some of those accounts.
Yeah.
They're pretty intense.
I mean, you're reading Fire and Brimstone. How can you not do the Fire and Brimstone preacher guy?
Well, okay. I thought, if I do that, those guys are going to be, you're over dramatizing this, you guy. You're over emoting.
No, that's how it has to be delivered, man. You got to do it that way.
Well, okay then.
Distemperance.
But I got to say, I this dive into symbolism is I'm thoroughly fascinated by symbolism, and the realization that it actually has a coherent meaning. That if you can learn the alphabet and then the grammar, and you can learn the meaning of the words and how they're put together, then suddenly, it's very much, like the process of learning how to read. If you don't know how to read, if you're illiterate, you're just going to look at things and it's a cluster of forms and shapes and it conveys no meaning, right? But once you know how to read, once you become literate, you can look at words and suddenly they have meaning. And sometimes those meanings can be life-changing.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love it too. I feel very privileged to be here learning all of this too at the same time. So, thanks so much. It's great stuff.
And I kind of, again, I don't think I'm not trying to create the impression that I have the final word on any of this.
No, but just the insight into it is.
But I've studied. I've got some insight into it, and what I'm hoping to do is to ignite a passion, an interest, a fascination amongst other people who are listening to this, who will take it upon themselves to dive into this stuff. Because one of the things I've noticed from doing this and becoming more public with it is that a lot of people contribute stuff, and sometimes it's, it doesn't seem like it has too much value to it. But other times I'm going, hey, this is really good stuff here. The good work that somebody is doing. And we'll have to talk more about that in future episodes and where one can find good sources of information, where we have other investigators and researchers following sort of parallel paths.
That's what I was going to say. Just the fact that you've collected all those images, is a great starting point for people to, latch on that it's not just a one-off obscure thing, that this was consistent and it wasn't just in one society or one country, the Mayans too on the other side of the ocean, and there wasn't particularly the bull there, right? But you kept pointing out how they had the Pleiades. So those are kind of a tandem. So that was more of a focus to them to link it to the Pleiades, where it was the bull with the Mithraism.
Right.
And they had a little bit of both.
We're going to be coming back to all that because we're at this level, we're just introducing the broad outlines. But we're going to be, by exploring this Ekpyrosis, or these examples of these extraordinary fires, we're going to, I think, present a real world empirical counterpart that will give us kind of a greater comprehension of actual events behind a lot of the mythology. And we're really, in a way, the term supernatural seems to imply something that's outside the realm of, known physics or whatever, but we can also look at it as super nature. And when we start talking about things on a cosmic level, we are talking about super nature. When we talk about, solar storms and meteor storms, and we get into all of this kind of stuff, we are looking at nature on a super level. And what has happened, I think, is that, the human race has been on this planet long enough that we've multiple times experienced, our ancestors experienced these tremendous cosmic events and experienced directly the consequences. And, it's probably multiple times that our species has stood on the brink of extinction. And, if we take some of the myths literally, the Hopi Indians, 4 times prior to this world, the previous world was destroyed. And now science is providing evidence that, there does seem to be a major population crash just at the Younger Dryas boundary. Well, the Younger Dryas boundary, as we pointed out, is 12,800 to 12,900 years ago. But the presence of the human species on Earth goes back a couple of 100,000 years at least. And we know that within that couple of 100,000 years, there have been these outsized events that have involved rapid planetary change, and that somehow other species did not survive, but the human species did. And that's how we are sitting here tonight recording this discussion that we're having. But I think having paying attention to the cosmic tempo is going to be critical. And the closer we get to that nodal point, the more critical it's going to be that people become aware that whether we like it or not, we are part of a much larger cosmic ecosystem. And we'll see analogies when we start looking into these historical events. At Peshtigo, what's interesting is that you had one group of people that instinctively knew something was pending. And you had another group of people who were completely oblivious and were going about their routine life without any awareness of the elements and what was going on in the elements. So when it came down to it, and when the cosmic fire struck, you had the people who had already begun to take, measures to increase the probability of survival. And they were the ones who were able to seek places of refuge. The others who were going about their business oblivious are pretty much the ones who got consumed. And so there's a moral to that. And we'll, actually, look at some of those examples because they're coming right out of the eyewitness accounts. And I got to say, these eyewitness accounts, they are very dramatic.
Yeah.
Oh,
they're very compelling. And
then you mentioned in a previous episode you bring in the X factor.
Yeah,
so that kind of goes along with the supernatural. How do these things happen? So I'm without the Cosmo cap, but let's. I hate to stop this stuff, I know you keep going, but you kind of put a good wrap on it there.
Yeah, that was.
I got to go prepare for the second coming.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably need to have T-shirts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I do. Last thing I want to say about this is it's that on the one hand we're like we need to be ready, but on the other hand I'm like it's telling it all of the myths are telling us that we won't be, right? So it's like, is it a warning or is it a foretelling? It kind of can be both, but on the one hand, the foretelling stuff in the old myths and the stories, you can't stop it. And everything that people try to do to stop it just makes it happen anyway. And so I'm wondering, what exactly is being said here? Is this a cycle that we can actually escape from, but then that would cease the great wheel. That would stop it. That would cease the ending of the ages, right? So it's like, what exactly is being said here?
Well, I think that
this is not a last comment. That's a first comment.
We could say that, look, we're here. So that means it's somebody survived previous catastrophes.
Right, but most of them died, right? That's what I'm saying. It's always an erasing and a re-cleansing. Mm-hmm. And if we actually, I don't want to. We're stopping the show, so this is just something to think about that I've been thinking about. It's like,
okay,
what exactly is being said to us here?
But don't you think also that those stories tell about humanity's inability to accept the inevitable?
Yeah.
Humanity's inability to accept what's happening and just blunder on, say, oh, well, it's not going to happen to me.
Yeah. And it's also, exactly. And it's also saying
that, drinking and marrying and
giving in marriage. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That seems to me like they're like, this is what always happens and you can't stop it. No matter how much you try.
You can't stop
into this discussion, but I take the presence of prophecy and the prophets as these guys are warning us. And the reason they're warning us is that, hey, if you take heed, some of you will survive and can keep going.
Some of you. That's exactly right.
Some of you.
Yeah.
But let us remember the words of Merlin, right? It is the doom of men that they forget.
Right.
And that was the
I need to remember that one.
The good fellas. You guys see that? Somebody put together. They took the Goodfellas poster.
Ah.
Did you see that?
No, I hadn't seen it. No.
Oh.
And put that quote on it.
Well, something like that. I think I have it right here. We can stop the show.
Yeah, we got to stop the show.
Yeah, we got to stop the show. Sorry, people. We got to stop
Thanks,
the show.
everybody.
RandallCarlson.com.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm having fun.
Go to RandallCarlson.com.
But we have to stop the
sign
show.
Sign up for the newsletter.
Okay.
That's the best way to keep up with everything that's going on without trying to be timely, and things will change. So, just get on the list for the newsletter at RandallCarlson.com.
There you go.
Yeah. Sign up for the newsletter.
Good night.
Thanks, guys. Great
Good night.
show.
But there will be more shows.
There will. That's right.
Yeah, there will be more. So,
persevering in the face of the apocalypse.